It wasn't the scream that haunted them. It was the silence that followed. In a quiet suburb of Brookhaven Falls, about 30 miles outside Savannah, Georgia, 8-year-old Lana Breyer disappeared without a trace. She had just left her piano lesson, waving goodbye to her teacher from the driveway. 10 minutes later, she was gone. No tire marks. No forced entry. No ransom demand. By morning, her photo covered telephone poles, gas stations, and social media feeds. Over 100 volunteers canvassed the area. Drones hovered. Even scent hounds from a neighboring county were brought in. Still nothing. It was as if the earth had opened and swallowed her whole. The town grieved before it even had answers. Candlelight vigils were held. A growing shrine of teddy bears and handwritten notes appeared beneath the stop sign at the end of Lana's street. Her mother, Marion Breyer, stopped speaking entirely. Her father, Glenn, sat every night on the front porch, the light left burning as if his daughter might still walk home. Everyone had a theory, a passing stranger, a deep family secret, a vendetta from a neighbor. But after 23 days and no leads, the whispers turned quiet. Grief calcified into silence. Then Officer Rowan Hale arrived, with a German shepherd nobody wanted. Rowan wasn't new to law enforcement. She had returned to Brookhaven Falls from Fort Worth, where she'd spent 15 years in narcotics and K-9 ops. She hadn't meant to bring Ranger with her, but she couldn't leave him behind. Ranger was a massive, weathered German shepherd with sharp eyes and a heavy past. He'd been retired after his previous handler died during a raid. Since then, no one could get through to him. Some said he was unstable, dangerous. But Rowan saw something different, a dog who wasn't done yet. When Lana's case went cold and the town began to forget, Rowan asked to reopen it, with Ranger in the lead. The department, out of ideas, barely hesitated. "You think the dog's gonna sniff out a ghost?" one officer joked. "Let's find out," Rowan said, clipping Ranger's leash and stepping into the neighborhood where Lana had vanished. The first day brought nothing. Ranger sniffed lawns, barked at garbage cans, growled at a passing mail truck. Rowan retraced Lana's walk from her piano teacher's home. She even let Ranger roam off-leash near the school's community garden. Nothing. But the second day was different. As soon as Rowan opened the cruiser door, Ranger sprang out, ears perked, body alert. He pulled toward a narrow, tree-lined cul-de-sac just 4 blocks from Lana's home. The street was overgrown, shaded, forgotten. At the end of the lane stood a beige 2-story house. Ivy curled up one side. The shutters were cracked. The mailbox read Harrington. Rowan knew the name. Walter and Irene Harrington, longtime residents. No kids. No criminal history. But Ranger wouldn't move past the house. He circled it twice like he was reading secrets in the air. At the side entrance, he stopped and let out a growl. Low, sharp, specific. "Easy," Rowan said, kneeling beside him. There was nothing visible. Just a hose, a dented wheelbarrow, and a basement storm door that hadn't been opened in decades. Then Ranger sat, rigid, intense, and barked once. For the first time in 23 days, Rowan felt something other than despair. Back at the precinct, Rowan's report drew more skepticism than support. "They already cleared that house on day 4, said Captain Irwin. "No forced entry." The old guy even offered coffee. Rowan didn't care. Something's off. Ranger's picking up on something. "Let me go back." Irwin sighed. "Unless you've got a warrant, you're wasting your time. And Judge Crowley isn't exactly generous with probable cause." But Rowan knew the loopholes. K-9 scent detection gave officers more leeway, especially with an active case. She filed for a secondary review, citing a possible scent trail. Just in case, she also submitted a noise complaint against the property. 2 days later, she was back at the Harringtons' door, badge out, warrant in hand, and Ranger at her side. Irene Harrington opened the door, her smile warm but shallow. "Back again?" she asked. "We already spoke with the others." "Yes, ma'am. Just following up on a scent detection. Won't take long." She hesitated but eventually let them in. Ranger moved like a dog possessed, past the foyer, through the dusty dining room, straight into the kitchen, and then down to the basement. The air changed. Mothballs, pine cleaner, the lingering scent of dampness. Paint cans, holiday bins, old tools. A washer coated in lint. Nothing immediately strange. Then Ranger stopped, in front of the far wall. No barking, no growling, just a stare. Ears upright, body rigid. Rowan stepped closer. The wall was freshly painted drywall, light blue, but the seams were unnatural. The temperature was wrong, warm for a basement. "What's behind this wall?" she asked. Irene blinked. "Storage. My husband built it. Years ago." "May I?" "I'd prefer you didn't," Irene interrupted, voice sharper. "You've had your look." Rowan stared at her, then back at Ranger, who remained unmoved. "Ma'am, we need to open this wall." Irene clutched the hem of her cardigan, trembling. Her eyes betrayed her. She didn't just know what was back there. She helped put it there. Ranger took a single step forward and let out a sharp bark. That was all it took. Irene backed away. Rowan called it in. "Unit 9, Code 63. Possible concealed structure. Requesting backup and breaching kit." When backup arrived, Rowan secured Irene upstairs. Ranger stayed downstairs, still planted like a statue. The first hammer strike shattered the drywall. The second tore a gaping hole. A smell hit them. Not rot, but air that didn't belong. Warm, stale, humid. They shone flashlights inside. A 3-foot crawl space, barely wide enough for an adult. At the end, a plywood panel. Crude. Rushed. Rowan climbed in. Gun holstered. Light in hand. She yanked the panel loose in one motion. Behind it was a room, barely the size of a walk-in closet. A battery lantern flickered from a nail. A stained mattress. A small pink backpack. A half-empty juice box. Then a whisper. "Please don't yell." Rowan froze. She swept her light toward the voice. A small shape unfolded from the corner like paper. Thin, pale, eyes wide. Lana Breyer. Same purple hoodie from the posters, now tattered. Bruised knees. Chapped lips. A cut on her cheek. But she was alive. "Lana," Rowan whispered, crawling in. "Sweetheart, is that you?" The girl didn't respond. She curled tighter. From behind Rowan, Ranger let out a low bark, not aggressive. A signal. Lana peeked around Rowan. Her expression softened. "The dog," she whispered. "You know him?" She nodded slowly. "He barked yesterday. I heard him." "You're safe now," Rowan said gently. "We're getting you out." But Lana shook her head. Is the quiet man gone?" Rowan went cold. Upstairs, Irene Harrington sat like a mannequin at her kitchen table. Her hands were white-knuckled. When Rowan asked, "Who was the quiet man?" Irene said nothing. "Your husband." Finally, a blink. He said he was helping her. Helping? Rowan's voice hardened. He said her family didn't love her, that they'd hurt her, that he was teaching her how to trust again. "And you believe that?" He said, "We were doing the right thing." Downstairs, Ranger growled again, low and guttural. Walter Harrington wasn't home when Lana was found. He'd reportedly left that morning to pick up medication and never returned. An APB went out before sunset. By nightfall, authorities found his rusted blue sedan abandoned near a hiking trail 12 miles out of town. 2 days later, a search team discovered him hiding inside a decaying hunting shack, armed with rope, canned food, and, most disturbingly, one of Lana's socks in his backpack. He was arrested without incident. What followed was a storm. News crews swarmed Brookhaven Falls. Microphones flashed. Headlines screamed, "Girl found behind wall." But the real credit didn't go to police leads or community tips. It went to a German shepherd named Ranger, the dog who wouldn't give up. He became a hero overnight. Children drew him in sidewalk chalk. The Brookhaven Falls Department received over 3,000 letters, most addressed to the brave dog. One fourth-grade class mailed a box of hand-drawn cards and peanut butter treats labeled "For Ranger, the best dog ever." But the celebration couldn't erase what Lana endured. She hardly spoke. She flinched at loud voices and shrank from sunlight. She wouldn't sleep unless Ranger was in the room. On her second night in the hospital, she whispered one request to Rowan. "Can Ranger sleep here?" "Of course," Rowan said. He curled up under her hospital bed and stayed until morning. When Rowan finally met with Lana's parents, Marianne and Glenn, the reunion was equal parts joyous and heartbreaking. Sobbing hugs, tears of relief. But behind it all, guilt lingered. How didn't we hear her? Marion asked through choked words. How didn't we know? Rowan explained what investigators uncovered. Walter Harrington had reinforced that basement wall with industrial soundproofing. It was designed to trap, not just people, but their voices. The perfect hiding place, planned long before. Irene, though complicit, claimed ignorance. She insisted she never entered the basement. Then the FBI got involved. A deeper investigation connected Walter Harrington to 2 other child disappearances across the Southeast, cases long gone cold. One from Tennessee in 2001, another in South Carolina in 1998. Both ended in tragedy. Only Lana survived, and only because a dog refused to move. A few days later, Lana sat at a small press conference beside Rowan and Ranger. She wore a yellow headband and a soft smile that flickered with every camera flash. When asked what she remembered most, she said, "I kept yelling, but nobody heard me. Then one day, I heard barking. It was Ranger. He found me." She leaned down and hugged him. That same day, in a sterile hospital therapy room, Lana confided something else to a child psychologist. The walls were too white. Too white, the therapist asked gently. Like the paint, Lana whispered, staring at nothing. "I used to count the bumps." "What bumps?" "The ones in the paint, behind the wall." To Lana, it wasn't a room. It was behind the wall. A place where time didn't exist. Where yelling didn't matter. Because no one came. Until Ranger did. She stayed close to him for weeks. Rowan brought Ranger to the hospital every morning and left voice notes of his barks when she couldn't. Once, Lana asked, "Is Ranger my dog now?" Rowan smiled. "He's yours for as long as he wants to be." That seemed to comfort her. She would sometimes just sit beside him, brushing his fur, saying nothing. When she did speak, it came in fragments. Pieces of memory. Names without faces. Rules the quiet man had given her. Pretend games. Schedules. "The woman never hurt me," she once told Rowan. "She just never looked at me." Meanwhile, investigators discovered something in the basement no one had noticed. A second, hidden panel. Inside it, a crate. Inside the crate, a torn backpack, a child's t-shirt, and a broken Polaroid. DNA confirmed what Rowan feared. The items belonged to Annalise Griggs, an 11-year-old girl who vanished from Columbia, South Carolina, in 1998. She was never found, until now, but only in memory. The discovery of Annalise Griggs' belongings turned the story dark overnight. What began as a miraculous rescue had morphed into something far more disturbing. The uncovering of a predator's decades-long web. Walter Harrington, now in custody, was no longer just the man who hid Lana. He was now a suspect in multiple child abduction cases across 3 states. Rowan sat alone one night, rereading the police report about Annalise. 11 years old, missing for 27 years, believed to have run away. No evidence, no leads, no closure. Now, at least, there was truth. A terrible, partial truth. But Ranger wasn't done. Days after Lana's rescue, packages began arriving at the Brookhaven Falls Police Department. No return address, no note. Each was postmarked from a different city. Greenville, Charleston, Ocala. The contents? Mismatched. A child's mitten, a faded birthday card, a single girl's sneaker, clearly from the 90s. Rowan thought it might be a hoax at first, a disturbed person playing with trauma for attention. But then came the third package. Inside, a school photo of a 10-year-old girl. Blonde, slightly crooked smile, a chipped front tooth. On the back, written in pencil, Nina, 2004, Hendersonville. Rowan's pulse spiked. She ran the name through the National Missing Child Database. There it was. Nina Forsyth disappeared walking home from school in Hendersonville, North Carolina, in 2004. Just 3 weeks after Walter Harrington sold a house 5 blocks from her school bus stop. Too close to be coincidence. Too familiar to ignore. Rowan sat in her cruiser late that night, the photo trembling in her hands. Ranger lay stretched across the back seat, not asleep, always half alert, even in rest. "You think she's still out there?" Rowan asked softly. "Or is this just another wall?" Ranger blinked, still, waiting. The answer, she knew, would come from him. Armed with new warrants, Rowan returned to the Harrington property. The house was under lockdown, roped in yellow tape. But this time, the search wasn't for Lana. It was for Nina. Agent Miles Preston of the FBI's Behavioral Division joined Rowan, along with 2 forensic techs. They started in the basement again. Everything looked the same. Too clean, too manicured. The paint's still fresh here, Rowan said, pointing at the wall Ranger had once barked at. The rest of the walls were older, dustier, uneven. Check that west corner, Rowan instructed. The techs used thermal imaging equipment. At first, nothing. But when they zoomed in, a faint anomaly appeared, a subtle heat signature. Preston stepped back. That's hollow. There's something behind it. Open it, Rowan said without hesitation. Crowbars were used this time. The wall gave in with a groan. Behind it, a narrow cavity, like a closet with no door. Inside, 3 plastic tubs, each sealed tightly with duct tape. The contents chilled the room. Photos. Dozens of them. Not violent, just still. Children sitting on porches, at playgrounds, in backyards. School portraits. Snapshots. Each had the same thing scrawled on the back. A name. A date. A city. Nina's face appeared twice. Once with her name and age. And again, dated 3 days later. March 6th, 2004. First morning here. Preston's jaw tensed. This is a record. A trophy case. Another photo showed a 6-year-old boy playing with a toy truck on a cement floor. The back read, Daniel, stayed 3 days. Left too soon. Rowan's voice was hollow. We need to tear this place down. There's more here. I can feel it. Ranger stood near the open cavity. Then, for the first time in days, he barked. The next morning, national news outlets were already calling the Harrington home a crime scene in a serial abduction investigation. The phrase, child predator compound, began trending online. Parents across the region started calling in, wondering if their own cold cases might be connected to the photos now being cataloged by the FBI. The question on everyone's lips, how had Walter Harrington remained invisible for so long? Rowan didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat at her kitchen table, flipping through the printed photographs found behind the false wall. Some kids had been reported missing. Others, most disturbingly, had never even been looked for. They were just gone. But one photo wouldn't let go of her. Nina. Blonde hair. Chipped tooth. That uneven, wary smile. Ranger lay by Rowan's feet. When she touched the photo, he lifted his head, ears twitching. You found Lana, she whispered to him. Can you find her too? Ranger blinked slowly, then laid his head back down. But the next morning, he started pulling again. This time, the trail led to the backyard, specifically to a battered old garden shed. It had been deemed irrelevant in the initial search, just rusted tools, lawn equipment, a grill. Nothing noteworthy. But now Rowan noticed the smell. Earthy, damp, not rot, but disturbed. She crouched near the rear of the shed. The floorboards were too clean, the dirt too soft, the scent wrong. They pulled up the planks. Beneath, a metal trap door. Rowan froze. She looked at Ranger. He stared back, silent, still. Call it in, she said. Get the team. The crawl space beneath the shed led to a plywood-reinforced tunnel. It was narrow, just wide enough for one person to pass through at a time. Battery-powered lanterns hung along the walls, long dead but clearly once used. Someone had built this deliberately. At the end of the tunnel, a small, hollow room, almost empty, except for a thin blanket on the ground, a single crayon drawing, and on the plywood wall, scratched by hand. Nina was here. Rowan stared at the message, stunned. The wood was old, but the carving? Fresh. Someone's been here recently, Agent Preston said, shining his light across the wall. Couldn't be from 2004. Not a chance. Forensics later confirmed it. The soil was disturbed no more than 2 months ago. Food wrappers and a used bandage were dated within weeks. While Lana was hidden, Preston murmured, she was nearby. But Harrington was in jail before this was found, Rowan replied. So who was keeping it active? That question set off a wave of investigation. Rowan and Preston interviewed contractors, repairmen, anyone who had ever worked at or near the Harrington home. One name kept coming up. Cliff Randall, mid-50s, quiet, lived in a camper behind his cousin's auto shop. No social media, paid in cash, worked odd jobs, pest control, roofing, basement repairs. Also, Harrington's handyman. Rowan pulled a dusty invoice from evidence. 6 months prior. Shed floor reinforcement plus panel install. Paid. In cash. Signed, Cliff Randall. He had built the trapdoor. Rowan printed the receipt, folded it in half, and looked over at Ranger. Let's go meet the builder. Rowan and Agent Preston drove to the edge of Ellerby, a small town an hour from Brookhaven Falls, to a decrepit auto yard surrounded by rusted vehicles and a haze of gasoline fumes. Behind the shop, in a sun-baked patch of gravel, sat a dented camper. A man in a lawn chair sipped from a can of soda, watching the sunset like he had nothing to hide. Cliff Randall. He didn't flinch when Rowan stepped out, badge on her hip, Ranger at her side. Something I can help you with? He asked flatly. Yeah, she said. You know Walter Harrington? Cliff shrugged. Did some patchwork for him a while back. Real quiet guy. Paid cash. What? Rowan watched him closely. Did he ever show you the inside of that shed? Nope. Just told me to fix the floor. Didn't say why. Then Ranger moved. His body tensed. His tail stiffened. A low growl rolled from his chest, ancient and primal. Rowan didn't touch her weapon, but her fingers brushed the grip. We'd like to look around. Cliff smirked. You got a warrant? Not yet, Preston said. But we will. Cliff stood slowly, smile fading. A single bead of sweat trickled down his temple. Be my guest. The camper reeked. Rotting food, spilled oil, body odor, and something worse. The chemical sweetness of cheap shampoo. Rowan's stomach twisted. Then she opened the narrow closet. Behind the clothes was a false panel. Behind that, a compartment. Inside, stacks of spiral-bound notebooks in jagged handwriting. Disposable cameras, some undeveloped. A tattered blue backpack, and a folded note. She's not safe, but she's trying. Agent Preston read one of the journals aloud. Saw her again. In the trees. Still won't speak. Just watches. Left food. She took it. Another entry. She scratched her name into the tunnel. She's still nearby. Nina hadn't just survived. She had escaped. And Cliff knew. They brought in cadaver dogs and drones. The woods behind the Harrington home stretched over 90 acres, part of a larger state preserve. Hundreds of places to hide. Endless ways to disappear. That's when Rowan made a decision no one expected. She removed Ranger's leash. Knelt beside him. Whispered, find her. No commands. No tracking aid. Just trust. Ranger vanished into the woods. For nearly an hour, he moved like a shadow between trees. Rowan and the team followed, hearts pounding. He circled tree trunks, sniffed disturbed earth, paused near an old stump. Then he stopped, not at a shelter, not at a body, at a clothesline, strung between two pine trees. On it, small garments. A makeshift sheet, pinned to the nearest tree, a torn scrap of paper. I don't trust you, but I trust the dog. Preston read it aloud, his voice barely a whisper. She's watching, Rowan said. And Ranger, still, stood motionless, waiting. They didn't chase her. There were no helicopters, no shouting search parties, no spotlights scanning treetops. Instead, Rowan returned to the clearing each morning with Ranger and a soft-voiced message. And she left behind supplies, clear plastic bins marked safe. Inside, fresh food and water, medical kits, notebooks and pens. Each time, by the next morning, the bins were empty, and a new note was left. I only come out at night. People hurt. Dogs protect. Is Harold gone? I want to be real again. Rowan wrote back, always by hand, always gentle. You are real. You are brave. Ranger misses you. One day, the note that came back wasn't just words. It was a drawing. A girl curled up next to a German shepherd. They were asleep beneath a starry sky. The quiet messages grew more vulnerable. I still hear his voice when I close my eyes. He told me the world wouldn't believe me. I scratched my name because I wanted someone to remember it. Rowan held on to every one like sacred relics. She left one final letter, written late at night. I was told you left too soon, but I don't believe that. I think you left right on time. I think you fought every day, and I think you're ready. Then she whistled once, sharp but soft. Ranger perked up. From the trees. A rustle. A shape. Thin. Pale. Unmoving. Thor, the voice whispered. She didn't yet know his new name was Ranger. He trotted forward calmly. She dropped to her knees, her hands wrapped around his fur. Her body collapsed into him like a child who had finally stopped running from the dark. Nina Forsyth had come out of the woods. No sirens, no flashbulbs, no shouting. Rowan stepped forward quietly, holding a blanket. Nina didn't speak at first. She didn't resist either. She just pressed her face into Ranger's shoulder, as if anchoring herself to something real. Paramedics offered a stretcher. She refused. "I'll walk," she whispered. "Just don't take me back inside." She clutched a single piece of notebook paper as they made their way to the vehicle. It was a letter she never left in the bin. She passed it to Rowan without speaking. It read, "If I walk out, don't take me back inside. Ever again." Rowan folded it, tucked it into her jacket pocket. "You have my word." At the hospital, Nina was examined for dehydration, malnourishment, and prolonged exposure to the elements. The results stunned everyone, not because she had survived, but because she was lucid, coherent, fully aware of the date. She remembered who she was, where she'd been, and more terrifyingly, what had happened. She confirmed it in a quiet conversation with Rowan. "I wasn't the only one." That simple sentence shattered everything. Nina had seen others, children, moved like packages between places. She didn't know names, sometimes not even faces, just footsteps, whispers, the quiet hum of fear shared in passing, behind plywood and lies. And Walter Harrington? He hadn't been working alone. The FBI dug in. Nina's journals and drawings provided clues, trails marked in trees, names etched into bark, and mentions of men who didn't wear uniforms but acted like jailers. It all pointed to a network, small, secretive, horrific. And at the center of it, Cliff Randall. He wasn't just a handyman. He was a recruiter, a supplier, a builder of hideouts. In exchange for a reduced sentence, he confessed. But what he revealed was worse than imagined. Cliff had first seen Nina in the woods near the Harrington property in early 2023. She was no longer a child, but not quite grown, thin, wild-eyed, and fast. She never spoke, just watched. He wrote in his journal, "She ran when I saw her. I left food. She took it. I left a flashlight. She moved it. We played a kind of game. One I didn't win." He admitted to building the tunnel under the shed. He admitted he knew Walter kept girls, and that others, like him, had helped. "I didn't hurt them," he claimed in court. "I just made the walls." The court didn't care. He was sentenced to 35 years in federal prison. Walter Harrington would never see a courtroom. 3 months after his arrest, he died of a heart attack in custody. No apology, no confession, just silence. But silence wouldn't win, because Nina was still standing. She refused TV interviews. She declined documentaries. But one day, she sat in a quiet library meeting room with Rowan and a small group of families who had also lost children. Nina wore jeans and a flannel shirt, her hair pulled back in a simple braid. Ranger lay at her feet, unmoving, his presence like a lighthouse. "I used to think if I escaped," she said softly, "no one would believe me. Then I saw a dog sit in front of a wall and refuse to move, and someone listened." The small gathering where Nina spoke wasn't meant for cameras. It wasn't on the news. It wasn't filmed or streamed or turned into content. It was for survivors. And that's where Lana Breyer finally met Nina Forsyth. Lana sat beside her parents, clutching a folded drawing in her lap. She watched Ranger, wide-eyed, reverent, then looked up at the older girl who had lived in hiding while Lana was behind the wall. When the talk ended, Lana approached slowly, almost shyly. Nina knelt to her level. "Is that for me?" she asked gently, nodding to the paper in Lana's hand. Lana nodded and passed it over. It was a crayon sketch. Ranger with a cape, standing tall, a little girl behind him, smiling in the sunlight. Underneath it read, "He's a superhero." Nina smiled, tears in her eyes. "Yeah," she whispered, "he really is." The moment they hugged, silent and sure, felt like something holy. A kind of healing that no adult could offer. Just two girls, bound by the same wound, saved by the same dog. Weeks later, the town of Brookhaven Falls held a ceremony. The Harrington home was demolished. Not boarded up, not preserved as some gruesome memorial. Demolished, brick by brick, memory by memory. In its place, a garden was planted, open to the public. No fences, No gates. A sign at the entrance read, "For the ones who were silenced, and the ones who refused to stop listening." Every spring, a quiet walk is held through the garden. Every year, it's led by Officer Rowan Hale and her partner, Ranger, now gray around the muzzle but still proud in his navy vest, his silver honorary badge gleaming. The mayor officially declared Ranger Day to be celebrated every April. Families gathered in the square. Kids got free ice cream. Parents knelt beside the stone that bore the names of the children who were never found, but never forgotten. Rowan received a departmental commendation for her work. She accepted it, graciously, but quietly, because for her, there was only one voice that mattered. After the ceremony, in the back seat of her cruiser, Ranger lay curled peacefully. Rowan reached back, scratched his ears, and whispered, "They call you a hero." He didn't react. "But I think what you really are is a listener." And she meant it. The garden bloomed. The porch lights in Brookhaven Falls returned to their usual warm glow. The town breathed easier. But Rowan Hale knew better. Some cases don't close. They evolve. A month after the demolition of the Harrington home, she sat on her porch with Ranger curled at her feet. He was older now, slower to rise, quicker to nap, but his eyes never lost their fire. Then came the boxes. They arrived 2 weeks after Nina moved in with relatives in Ashbury, a quiet mountain town. Each one was postmarked from a different address. Greensboro, Knoxville, Ocala. At first, they made no sense. One held a child's mitten from the 1990s. Another, a faded Valentine's card. A third, a single shoe and a crumpled sketch of a treehouse. But the fourth changed everything. Inside, a school photo of a girl around 10. Blonde hair, crooked front tooth, uneven posture. Written on the back in smudged pencil. Nina, 2004, Hendersonville. Rowan froze. "She's still out there," she whispered. "Or someone wants us to believe she is." But then she checked the handwriting, different than Harrington's. This wasn't from him. This was from someone who wanted Nina found, and had known she survived. Rowan brought it to Agent Preston, the lead on the federal case. He flipped through the photos and items, his face hardening. "We've always suspected Harrington had help," he said. This feels like guilt, or regret, or breadcrumbs," Rowan muttered. Preston looked at her. "Why you?" "Because Ranger found her. Found them both. He doesn't chase ghosts. He follows something real." Out of that fire, the Ranger Fund was born. A first-of-its-kind federal partnership to reopen cold missing child cases using retired working dogs with their former handlers. Rowan was asked to lead it. She agreed, but with one condition. "Ranger comes with me." And so he did. He traveled with her to precincts across the South. He lay quietly during briefings, lifted his ears during interviews. And sometimes, when shown old photos, he would grow still, his body reading pain in invisible ink. They started reopening cases. Files that had sat cold for decades began to thaw. And always, Ranger was the constant. Not a miracle, not magic, but memory on 4 legs. It arrived on a rainy Thursday. No return address. Postmarked from Gainesville. Just like the others. Plain, padded, silent. Rowan almost didn't open it right away. The week had been heavy. Meetings with law enforcement, another cold case closed in Tallahassee, and Ranger had begun limping on his back right leg. Nothing serious, the vet said. Just age. But as soon as she unwrapped the tape, she knew. This wasn't like the others. Inside, a lock of hair tied in a ribbon. A Polaroid of a girl, 6 or 7 years old, sitting on a porch, legs crossed, toy dinosaur in her lap. A note in a different hand than the previous boxes. She was the first. "I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to stop it. But I tried. Please find her." Rowan turned the photo over. Melinda, 1991, Thomaston. She sat very still. Ranger shifted by her side, but didn't stand. His ears tilted. "Another wall," Rowan said quietly. Another silence that never ended. She brought the box to Agent Preston, who reviewed it in silence. "We've confirmed the girl," he finally said. "Melinda Carter. Disappeared from her grandmother's house in 1991. No known suspects. The house was owned by a man named," he paused, "Walter's older cousin. A man named Robert Harrington." Rowan's blood went cold. The network went further than they thought. It didn't start with Walter. He had learned it from someone else. A legacy of quiet monsters. Ranger stood up suddenly. His joints popped, but he was alert. Rowan watched him. He looked toward the door, then back at her. "Do you want to go?" she asked. He didn't wag his tail. He just waited. The next morning, she returned to Thomaston with Agent Preston, 2 search units, and a federal warrant to access a long-abandoned home outside of town, once owned by Robert Harrington. It was empty now, the yard overgrown, windows broken, floors soft with rot. But in the back, a cellar door, nailed shut from the outside. Ranger walked to it, sat down, then barked once. They pried it open. The stench hit them, mildew, mold, and something older. The stairs creaked as they descended. The cellar was small, nothing obvious, until Ranger moved to a far corner and sniffed, then scratched. The wall looked solid, but behind it, a hidden alcove. Inside, a girl's sweater, disintegrated with time. A rotted stuffed animal. A school library card, half-faded, but readable. Melinda Carter. She was never found. Now, they knew where she had gone. And even though it wasn't a rescue, it was an ending. A wall broken. A silence filled. After Melinda Carter's remains were recovered, the news came and went quickly. There were no dramatic rescues this time. No hopeful vigils. Just a family finally able to say goodbye after 33 years of silence. But for Rowan Hale and Ranger, it meant one more wall had come down. One more child who no longer had to be a mystery. A month later, Rowan sat on the back porch of a safe house in the Blue Ridge foothills. The air was thick with honeysuckle and summer heat. Ranger lay at her feet, his muzzle grayer than ever, his breathing slow but steady. Beside her sat Nina Forsyth. She had just come in from the garden, mud on her jeans, sleeves rolled to her elbows. She had begun volunteering with trauma survivors, planting things, growing things, reclaiming ground once used for hiding. Rowan handed her a cup of tea. "Do you ever wonder," Rowan began, "what would have happened if we hadn't found you?" Nina looked at the trees, thought for a moment. "I wouldn't have made it through another winter." They sat in silence for a while. Then Nina turned, eyes sharp, clearer than Rowan had ever seen. "But I wasn't waiting for you," she said quietly. Rowan blinked. "What do you mean?" Nina reached down, scratched behind Ranger's ear. He let out a small grunt of satisfaction. "I was waiting for him," she whispered. "He's the only one who came back." Ranger officially retired that fall. His name was etched into the State K-9 Hall of Honor. The Ranger Fund expanded into 3 new states. Over a dozen departments adopted new K-9 cold case units. But the German Shepherd himself? He stayed with Rowan. He slept more, ran less, still perked up at the squeak of a shed door or the hush of a distant bark. His instincts, like his legacy, refused to retire. He had found the lost. He had barked at the walls no one else noticed. He had reminded the world that silence can be broken if someone is listening. If Ranger's story moved you, if you believe that no wall should ever keep a child hidden, please hit like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Tell us in the comments. What moment stayed with you the most? What did Ranger teach you about loyalty, courage, and listening when it matters most? Subscribe to Wildkin Pawas Stories for more true stories of hope, healing, and the animals who never stop searching.